See you soon.
7 months since Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared with 239 passengers and crew on board. The airliner was on a scheduled flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing when it vanished and no trace of the plane has been found since. Preparations are now being made for the next phase of the underwater search for the wreckage in the southern Indian Ocean. Meanwhile, the Malaysian contracted vessel Go Phoenix has set sail on a fresh mission to locate Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 lost 7 months ago. Steaming to its newly refined search zone 2,000 km off the western coast of Australia, it bears with not only the Jalur Gemilang and Petronas logo, but also renewed hope of the plane finally being found. While some of the cautiously optimistic for fear another disappointment, Kuala Lumpur believe this round of the massive search could be it. The hope of a successful mission in one of the world's most complex searches for a downed airliner, to quote Defence Minister Datuk Sri Hishamuddin Hussein, hinges on the use of one of the best technologies available. There was no reason MH370 could not be found if, indeed, the wreckage, which the Joint Agency Coordination Centre said would likely be in pieces, was in the area where Go Phoenix had been tasked to search. 99.9% chance of happening, and the odds of finding the aircraft would be better if more parties join in the search.
Okay, and we definitely hope for the best. You know, we heard what our guest doctor was saying earlier. It's challenging, but the fact that they're still trying, and we hope we can find something out of the search being done. It may be time consuming, but let's hope for the best. And like in Instagram and any other social media, hashtag pray for MH370. Okay, now back with something related to MH370 as well, Zamir.
From the sea to satellite.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'd like to welcome our guest in the studio talking about functions and limitations of satellites, Mr. Zainuddin Abdul, who is the Vice President of Spacecraft Engineering and Operations from MIASAT. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Right, maybe you can start off by telling us, and also the audience, for the benefit of the audience of course, what exactly is a satellite and also what are its functions?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting us and giving a chance to MIASAT to be here today to explain a little bit about what is a satellite. Technically, satellite is an object that we put in space.
Okay.
It revolves or rotates or orbits around another bigger body at a certain height. So this the satellite in normal day-to-day, you can see moon as also defined as a satellite in terms of because it's rotating around the Earth. So moon also clarified or classified as a satellite. Okay? In the context of today's discussion, the satellite that we are referring to is a man-made object where we put in orbit at certain height with certain mission or purpose.
Okay.
So that is the satellite that we're talking about today.
And as far as we know, there are a few types of satellites, and probably you can share with us, explain to us the types of satellites and the functions of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we go into the type of satellites, first of all, we need to know what is the orbit the satellite is operating at.
I see.
Because the orbit will signify or will tell us what kind of capability for that particular satellite is.
Right.
There are three types of orbit normally in nowadays. First is a low orbit, or people refer to as a low Earth orbit. That orbit is about 500 to 2,000 kilometers above sea level. And the second one is the medium Earth orbit, which is between 5,000 to 20,000 kilometers. And finally, the another one is the higher, much higher orbit, that is 36,000 kilometers, which we call it geostationary orbit. Okay? Based on this orbit, we can put a various satellite and with a certain specific function. Let's say the low Earth orbit satellites. Those orbit around 500 to 2,000 kilometers. The satellite in that particular orbit typically more suitable for taking photos, doing Earth imagery, and doing reconnaissance or radar kind of thing. Okay, and for a higher orbit, a bit higher orbit like a medium Earth orbit, the most common one nowadays is the navigational purpose, like a GPS. People talk about GPS nowadays, right? So everyone has GPS now, even not in your handphone and whatnot. Okay. And on the higher orbit satellite, 36,000 kilometers above sea level, is where we put our communication or broadcast satellites. So this satellite typically main purpose is to provide the communication to the community on the Earth, basically. Okay? So those are the three levels of orbit with the three different mission or three different specific tasks for satellite to be in orbit.
Nice.
When it comes to MEASAT, we have a number of satellites. Do they actually communicate with other satellites owned by other countries?
Yeah.
The satellite itself will not communicate between the satellite to satellites.
Okay.
To communicate to a satellite to other location on Earth, basically we require the ground station. Ground station will do the one who providing the communication to a satellite. So from one Earth station somewhere, let's say from the Europe, and they transmit the signal to a satellite in space, and then the signal coming down again to another location, let's say in Malaysia.
Okay.
So then between satellites, there are technology to communicate between satellites, but it's not really common in these days.
Okay. Now speaking on the search of MH370, could a surveillance satellite be useful in tracking or locating MH370?
Okay. For that question, there are two wording that you bring up. One is a surveillance, and another one is tracking.
Yes.
Okay? There are two different technology in there. For surveillance, actually, the satellite need to continuously monitor our globe or the Earth's surface, basically, taking photos or doing radars, kind of thing.
Okay.
And for a tracking, require an onboard signal from the object itself. Let's say for an aircraft to do, for us, people on the ground to track the aircraft, there is a need to have a beacon on board.
Right.
So then we track the beacon. So doing that for MH370 cases, for unknown reason, we don't know what happened, but the beacon was turned off.
Right.
And then for that reason, the tracking would not be possible anymore.
I see.
That is the problem for the tracking.
Right.
For tracking, at any time, we need to have a source.
So can a satellite do tracking, surveillance, and communication?
At the same time?
At the same time. Can they do all three? Or we haven't reached to that level yet?
Well, if we're trying to do something like that, meaning the satellite going to be a very big satellite.
Yes.
You have to put a lot of equipment, and then it's going to be very costly to launch this type of satellite.
Right.
Okay.
And secondly, also, if we are talking about we're trying to do communication satellite or broadcast, which is satellite has to be very, very high up in space.
Yeah.
And then for that particular satellite to take a photo on the ground will not have enough granularity to look at the small object.
Right.
Yes.
So that's going to be a problem.
I see.
So, but if we bring down, let's say, if we thought we're going to put the communication satellite on the lower orbit because we're going to do taking photo as well. For a lower orbit satellite, the satellite tend to move very fast, and if moving fast, it will not be good for communication because you've got the line of sight to satellite for a few minutes, and then after that, satellite will be gone. It will not be good for broadcast or for normal communication. So there's two different things. So that's why it will not be beneficial to have combined mission on one satellite.
Not advisable.
And the MEASAT satellites that we have now, what's the function, the main function?
The main function for MEASAT satellite is to provide the communication and broadcast services.
Okay. So well, the question is, the next question is something where all viewers would like to know, probably in detail. Like, let's say we're touching on the DTH satellite TV degrade or sometimes disappear completely during rainstorms. So probably can explain to us why does that happen?
Yeah.
And okay.
Okay, that is the.
It's weather dependent, isn't it?
All communication system, they have a drawback or they have the limitation in terms of penetrating the weather.
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't matter whether DTH or any other communication, like a radar itself. So if there is a heavy rain or if there is a cloud, depending on what kind of frequency that we're using for that particular transmission, the impact will be different. So for direct to home, generally in this world nowadays, we are using the high frequency signal for this transmission. This high frequency signal has a tendency to have a degradation due to rain attenuation.
Right. In terms of MEASAT, from your side from MEASAT side, will MEASAT be launching any more satellites, especially surveillance satellites in the future?
At the moment, Miasat expertise in satellite communication and broadcasting and high throughput satellites. So that's what the satellite we are allowed to operate, and we have expertise in operating. So we'll continue to operate communication satellite for now.
Okay, so it's interesting what we have just discovered actually about satellite, the functions and what it can do. So finally, probably a word or two to the viewers. That probably they can expect something magnificent coming out really soon.
Any upcoming news from Miasat? Where can we go to?
Well, we have a website, www.miasat.com, where people can find what is Miasat doing, and then how many satellites we have in orbit, what are the services that we will offer.
Okay. All right. So thank you once again, Mr. Zainuddin Abdul, Vice President of Spacecraft Engineering Operations.
From Miasat,
and from Miasat, thank you for sharing with us a few things important, I guess, and also played a part in the search of MH370. And after this,